So, for today's topic, I'm going to be covering the idea of divisions in Call of Duty World War II, and more importantly, what they mean for competitive COD moving forward. So, first off, for those of you who don't know, divisions in Call of Duty World War II is the replacement to create a class. And essentially, what it does is it forces certain perks and attachments on guns and kind of like bases them based off what gun you're using. So, for example, one of the big things that we've heard and is confirmed already is the fact that assault rifle players who are using the division called infantry, which is the assault rifle division, can have a bayonet charge, and no other like class or division has the ability to use bayonet charge, right? So, for the purposes of competitive COD, I think the first reaction, people may be kind of worried, like, well, if you can't create a class, like, and there's kind of like these default classes, or there's kind of like not the ability for everyone to have a perk that could potentially break the game. And you may be right, but I think what really helps competitive COD in this game is the fact that they have the ability to kind of make all of the classes really balanced in a way that we've never seen before, right? So, for example, so the assault rifle class, like I've said before, has the ability to do a bayonet charge. But for example, they could do something where, I mean, sure they have a bayonet charge, but take away steady aim, take away or not steady aim, excuse me, take away lightweight or marathon potentially, perks that we've seen before that allow you to run faster and for longer distances or be able to even, sprint like without having to stop. And you take those away from assault rifle classes, they are significantly less mobile. And of course, the bayonet charge kind of acts like a sprint, but it's more of like a melee weapon at that point than actually like being able to use that to have like better movement or shoot a player with like like moving back and forth. And so this creates a lot of chances for teams to be very tactical with how they choose. And another thing I've kind of thought about too is the idea that one player on each team can only use a certain division. So essentially, to kind of explain that, um, like how in Black Ops 3 and Infinite Warfare they've introduced specialists. Of course, these aren't like specialists. There's no like bonus kill streak essentially, but they are specialists in the fact that they have access to only certain things, right? So like obviously, again, SMG players who are using airborne can't use assault rifles, right? Because airborne is the SMG division. So essentially, this creates almost like a two-way kind of argument where one could be like just let players use whatever, right? And you have maybe a map where you're running two infantry, two airborne, which essentially is the now equivalent of two SMGs, two ARs, which is what you see in Call of Duty all the time, or in Infinite Warfare in the games of the past few years that have been a lot faster because of the EXO movement. You've got sometimes three SMGs, even four SMGs on a map like I believe in Advanced Warfare. Like Biolab, a lot of people used all ASM ones on that map and things like that. So there's certainly like possibilities to just keep it like that, keep it kind of the way it is. But I think there's also the chance for maybe an experiment in competitive COD where you kind of do, like one person on your team can be infantry at a time, one person can be airborne, one person can be, the other divisions that essentially make it so that you've got a situation where you might have a player who's really good with an assault rifle and a player who's really good with the SMG, and then you've got to kind of figure it out for the other two players. Now, the one thing I will say that kind of limits that is I mean, the LMGs are good. Like the LMGs don't bother me as much, but forcing a player, like your fourth player on your team, is pretty much forced to either use a sniper rifle or a shotgun, and I don't think that that's good for competitive Call of Duty. Like I don't think introducing a shotgun as a mainstay is something you'd necessarily want. So I think from that aspect, it's hard. But you could even do something where you're like, like you get three, you have to have one armored, one airborne, and one infantry, and then the fourth player just gets to choose one of those three or something like that. Because I know back in Call of Duty 4, there was a thing called Pro Mod, which essentially made it so I believe players like you literally had it how I just explained it, where one player could use an assault rifle, one player could use the SMG class, in that game. One player had to use a shotgun class, and one player had to use an LMG or a sniper class, and it was S&D only back then, which makes it a lot more viable, of course. But I think it's certainly possible today. I mean, there's a lot of situations in competitive Call of Duty where like you could see a shotgun be used. There's like times where you could see like on a hard point, even like if someone's rushing hill or flooding a hard point, kill them with a shotgun. S&D obviously, like you could use the shotgun, or in most cases for S&D, you'd see a sniper. You wouldn't see a shotgun, I would imagine. And then, we've seen the shotgun used in the past. We saw, I believe it was Clayster who kind of started the meta of the Bulldog back in Ghosts. I remember he just like always used it on Sovereign, or was it? It was Rambo actually who used the Bulldog a lot on Sovereign. I remember as well. And those are two players who like kind of have forced like there was almost a shotgun meta at one point in that game where like every player, well not every player, but there was like one guy on every team who used a Bulldog, which of course was the semi-auto shotgun if people remember back in Call of Duty Ghosts. So I think there's like a real chance for this to be useful, and I think it can be very interesting. Another thing I think that kind of hinders it, though, is the fact that if you're trying to create like kind of a balance between all the classes, I think it's really hard to kind of create a balance when you're almost forcing players to use guns to a sense. Because if you think about it, like how balanced can you make a shotgun compared to an assault rifle? Like those are two completely different situational weapons, and it's really hard for those to work like in a balanced fashion, right? Because you don't want. There's certainly a way to do it, I guess, if you think about it. Because of course you could have like you don't want the shotgun to have so much range, but you want the AR to not be able to win a gunfight against a shotgun unless it's just straight up missing, right? And I think that is something that could be made and like could actually like be balanced in a way, but I just don't know if we've ever seen like a competitive Call of Duty developer who's actually been able to make all of the guns balanced in a sense. Like Black Ops 2 had really good gun balancing, but people didn't use the KSG in competitive. Like people who played Black Ops 2 will know that the KSG is like a shotgun mixed with a sniper rifle. Like you could hit people with long barrel and quick draw and stock. If you put those three on, you could hit people from across the map. And people, it was I believe it was actually banned in competitive play, which it should have been. I mean, it was overpowered by all degree, but it's one of those things where like it wasn't a balanced weapon, so they instead of fixing it they just removed it from competitive, which is certainly a viable option. I'm not going to disregard the fact that you should remove stuff. Like I'm not trying to say like, hey, we should all be able to have rocket launchers or things like that. That being said, you want to create something that's competitive, but I think especially when we're going back to boots on the ground, you want something that's refreshing. And if there was a time for them to make something new, like they've done here with the divisions, this is the time to do it for competitive COD. I'm not gonna say like they should do, they shouldn't, do something completely crazy, right? Like they shouldn't introduce like all new game types, or they shouldn't put like team deathmatch in competitive, right? But they should consider changes that could be made, right? Because Infinite Warfare has been like a record low year for a lot of viewership and things like that for Call of Duty. Or, well, I suppose it's been kind of a downfall since Jetpack started, especially since the game before that was Ghost, which was pretty good by most standards. And Black Ops 2 obviously was the reason competitive Call of Duty is even what it is now, right? So I think it's possible for them to create kind of a good balance with the division system, and I think it's possible for them to kind of implement new rules almost and kind of make competitive Call of Duty again, like, or good again, excuse me, to not try to copyright a Donald Trump quote almost. But yeah, I mean, I think they have an opportunity now where it's almost like every player in Call of Duty is hitting the refresh button. Like we've seen boots on the ground before, and everyone seemed to enjoy it, obviously. And then we went to jetpacks. We tried it. It worked for part of Advanced Warfare, and then it kind of died out. And then it worked again at the beginning of Black Ops 3. And Black Ops 3 was pretty successful overall, I'd say. I didn't really have a problem with the movement in Black Ops 3. And then Infinite Warfare, I think it's just gotten to the point where everyone obviously is fed up with playing this game. And not only was it not like boots on the ground, it wasn't what people actually asked for. It just isn't a very well made game as far as like just the basic mechanics of actually playing Call of Duty, right? Because if the game was the same movement as Black Ops 3, which it is, but was as good as Black Ops 3 and was, you know, as good mechanically and had as good gun balancing, there would be more players active right now. But this is one of those games where like everyone has quit playing. And of course, that doesn't help because Modern Warfare 1 got remastered or COD 4, which certainly doesn't help that. But even then, like the game is just not good, and there's just no way really around it. So overall, after getting off track a little bit, overall, I think Divisions is something that can really work in Call of Duty. But overall, I think this video is kind of almost more about not only divisions in competitive Call of Duty, but how Call of Duty competitive can make changes going into this year and almost should make changes going into this year to try and fix all of the minor issues we've had over the past 3 or 4 years with competitive Call of Duty. Because of course, everyone always talks about that they want Black Ops 2 back, and it's not completely possible to get Black Ops 2 back. But I think there's certainly a chance for this game to be very good. I mean, we've seen everyone who's played it say it's really good. And so I think we're in for a big year, and I hope that the developers can get it right with the mechanics and the competitiveness and bring competitive, Call of Duty back to the top of esports.